The car wasn't on the list. There was no registration. The Queen Consort's son was the one driving it. There was no escort or paperwork, just a large green Jaguar estate car with a trunk that was sagging from all the secrets it held. People who worked at Clarence House ignored it, but the Royal Guard didn't. He didn't ask again, because the diplomatic tag came back blank, and Camilla herself wouldn't let him look. He smashed the trunk lock with the back of his rifle and found what had been missing from the royal collection since Queen Elizabeth died, the late Queen's Coronation diamonds, which had been concealed and were waiting to be melted down into a necklace with Camilla's initials on it. Before we show you exactly how this fight got out of hand and what happened next, make sure you're subscribed and have the bell symbol turned on. Also, leave a comment in the comments section letting us know where you're watching from. What you're about to watch is one of the most disturbing things that has ever happened on Crown property. The sky over Clarence House that morning was gray, flat, and colorless. It was the kind of London gray that made everything feel heavy and made the air taste like wet stone. Hedges cut crisp and gravel smoothed out. The Union Jack hardly moved above the gate. Sergeant Arthur Bainbridge stood at the inner edge like he was made of the same stone as the building behind him. His body had learned to stay still after 15 years of service, but his instincts never ceased moving. He moved his weight a little bit to lessen the stiffness in his left knee. Not age. Hellman. This was a reminder that ceremonial duty didn't erase what happened before it. The gun next to him was cleaned, properly aligned, and not just for show. He was more than just a decoration, but most people didn't get that. A Bentley was planned, deep blue, Camilla's typical, with the same driver, and it was cleared 2 days ahead of time by Royal Household Operations. Instead, a dark green Jaguar estate showed up without warning, without being registered, and without being wanted. It slid into the courtyard like it owned the cobblestones. The windows were tinted almost completely, and the wheels were shiny clean. Even though the approach was gravel, the automobile didn't look like it had been driven. It looked staged. Arthur's eyes got sharper. The back axle sagged, but not by a lot. Weight distribution that is not even. There was something heavy in the trunk, and the diplomatic tag on the dash was blank, not missing, or blank. He noticed the license plate. Then he tapped his encrypted tablet twice and waited for the scan to finish. No match was found. He gave it another go. Broader search. No matches discovered in the Metropolitan Police, Civil Registry, or diplomatic access logs. His jaw got stiff. Third try. The mod transport layer is still blank. Not a wrong entry, not a plate that was stolen. As this car rolled to a smooth stop near the south entrance, it had been deliberately erased from all official systems in London. Arthur took a step forward, just enough to see the driver's profile. A man in a fitted suit with thin-framed spectacles, his face turned down, no eye contact, and no acknowledgement. This was not the driver they had been warned to expect, and it was definitely not the car. Arthur didn't leave his post, but something inside him changed. It was like a quiet recalibration, like a switch going from routine to alert. This wasn't a visit from family. This wasn't a guest who came early. This was done on purpose. His thumb was above the tablet's second menu. Protocol only called for escalation when there was a clear threat or a problem with the procedure. This had both. Arthur Bainbridge, a Coldstream Guard and son of a Falkland veteran, had never missed a warning bell that rang this loudly in his whole career. He opened a silent journal and typed the first line. Unscheduled vehicle, no registry match, priority flag, awaiting justification. Then he saw the car door open, and the courtyard got quieter. The windows were up and the doors were closed, so the rest of the world couldn't get in. The air inside the Jaguar smelled faintly of leather and lilac perfume. Camila sat with her back straight and her gloves folded over her lap, but she kept looking at the trunk with brief, apprehensive glances, like someone examining a stolen handbag. She wore a teal coat with a high collar and gold thread stitching, and a sapphire brooch that was so big it caught the light every time she moved her seatbelt. She already had real diamonds glittering around her throat, but not the ones. Say it again, she responded in a chilly, clipped voice. The contents were sealed just like I told you to. Thomas Parker Bowles held the wheel, his knuckles pallid against the black leather, and the box was lined, temperature-controlled, and had foam padding. Everything looks like it came from the British Museum. Camila laughed for a short time, and it was sharp. Yes, it did, darling. That's the point. He didn't say anything. She leaned back and looked up through the tinted glass. Isn't it kind of poetic? These stones have been locked up since her funeral, and all that sparkle is just collecting dust in Windsor. For what? Symbolism. Legacy. Nonsense. Thomas looked to the side. They belong to your mother-in-law. She's dead, Camila stated bluntly. And I am Queen Consort now. These pieces were meant to shine on royalty, not sit behind glass for schoolchildren to point at. He shuffled uneasily. Do you really think no one will notice? That's not a trinket from the pantry. It's the Cullinan pairing. 3 and 4. The ones from her Coronation set. Camila gently turned her head. And if I wear a custom setting to the Vienna Gala next month, who will know where the stones came from? No one looks at settings anymore. They just see sparkle and praise the budget. Thomas tapped his finger on the gear lever. That guard out there, Bainbridge, I think he's watching us. He always watches, she responded with a shrug. He's ceremonial. He has the eyes of a hawk and the personality of an ironing board. He looks good in red, salutes the right people, and stands still when told. He ran the plates, Thomas said. Camila didn't move. Let him. It won't pull up anything. Thomas stopped and then said quietly. It pulled up nothing. Not even a mismet. The car's completely blank. Camila's eyes furrowed. Then he knows we cleaned it, which means he knows it wasn't an accident. Thomas looked in the rearview mirror to see Bainbridge's shadow beside the gate. Do you think he'll do something about it? He works for us, Camila replied as she opened a compact to touch up her makeup. She clicked it shut with a quick snap and said, not the other way around. And if he forgets that, she said in a low voice, maybe it's time for someone to remind him what happens when the crown turns on its own decorations. Sergeant Arthur Bainbridge hadn't moved from his post, but he also hadn't taken his eyes off the Jaguar. The automobile sat still near the south entrance, the motor purring softly and smoothly. 20 feet distant, footmen stood under the archway, unsure of whether to come closer. They could tell something was wrong. Arthur opened up the car's thermal signature on his tablet, which most guards didn't bother to do a second scan on. The trunk was warmer than the outside air, which was climate-controlled. That wasn't normal for cars. That was good enough for the archives. He checked the make and model of the Jaguar against records of the royal household fleet, but there was nothing there. He next looked into the records of private contractors who worked for the government to see whether they had anything. People had purposefully kept this car off of all the important systems. Arthur's finger was on the button to make things worse. Just one tap would send this to command. But if he was incorrect, and this was a strange but real deal, his career would be over by lunchtime. He saw Thomas's hand move to the door handle, and his eyes dart to the rearview mirror. He saw him hesitate, just long enough to confirm what Arthur already knew. People who were guilty constantly hesitated. Arthur stood behind the driver's door till it opened. Thomas Parker Bowles walked out and casually adjusted his sleeves, as if he had never been late without a good reason. He didn't say hello or nod. He just gave a shallow nod, like a man who thought being close was enough. Arthur waited 3 more seconds before going up to it. "Excuse me, sir," he said clearly, with a clear voice that was polite. "Before the vehicle can go, I need to check the entry details." Thomas turned to look at him with a smile. "Entry details? Registration, cargo manifest, point of departure. The car isn't in the clearance docket." Thomas smiled like a parent who was letting a child play. "You do know who's in the back seat?" Arthur didn't flinch. "Yes, sir. That's why I'm asking." The glass in the back window went down halfway. Camilla leaned forward, her gloved hand resting on the sill. She didn't look annoyed. She looked disappointed. The kind of people who are nice to people who work for them. "Sergeant Bainbridge," she said, making sure to say each syllable clearly. "Are you really sure you want to stop a car with the Queen Consort in it on her own property?" Arthur asked, keeping his stance. "Ma'am, with all due respect, your usual car is a Bentley. This is a Jaguar estate. We don't have any records of its registration, and its diplomatic credentials are blank." Thomas chuckled and looked around the courtyard. "Do you stop Amazon vans this thoroughly?" Arthur turned a little and lowered his voice just a little. "The back axles are sagging, sir. The trunks are heavier than normal, and the aftermarket hinges are stronger. This isn't normal for personal transport." Camilla's eyes narrowed. Arthur responded calmly, and she asked, per Section 4 of Resident Security Protocol, "I'm required to visually verify contents if irregular weight distribution and undocumented modifications are detected on unregistered vehicles." There it was, the line they didn't expect him to cross. Camilla's voice froze. "We have a private meeting with the Archbishop. Would you keep us here because of suspension springs?" Arthur looked her in the eye. "I'm not detaining, Mom. I'm asking for voluntary compliance before I log escalation." Thomas chuckled out loud. "Dear God, he's quoting policy to us," Camilla said, tilting her head. Arthur didn't say anything. "We are the policy." Instead, he took a step back, typed something into his encrypted tablet, and quietly entered it as Section 4 initiated. Potential Class A asset diversion awaiting override or clearance. The message disappeared from his screen a second later, but not before it pinged the desk at Wellington Barracks. And not until Camilla witnessed how his body language changed from request to obligation. Her smile got smaller. "Well," she whispered softly, "you've just made this very, very memorable." Arthur didn't move. He was banking on it. The engine of the Jaguar stopped with a soft shudder. The courtyard seemed to hold its breath for a time. After that, the back door opened, and Camilla came out. Her heels made a piercing sound against the stone, and her teal coat shone in the cloudy sky. A diamond brooch at her collarbone sparkled like a dare. She changed the position of one glove, and turned to Arthur with a look that said, "I'm in charge, not worried." Thomas followed, putting on dark leather gloves like an actor getting ready for a play that he knew would finish in applause. "Let's not make things worse," Sergeant Camilla stated loudly enough for the personnel close to hear. "This is a royal residence, not a checkpoint in Kabul." Arthur didn't move. "Ma'am, the trunk is still locked, and no one has been given permission to open it. Until that changes, I can't let anyone leave the courtyard," Thomas said with a big dramatic sigh. "I knew it was him, the one with the stare. Does he really sleep standing up?" A valet slowed down as he walked across the stone yard. 2 aides stayed outside the archway for a while. Even a florist who was bringing flowers for the afternoon stopped outside the gates. Everyone could feel it now. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. This was power hitting something that wouldn't give in. "You're not MI5, Thomas replied as he moved closer. "You're just a guard with a pretty hat and a clean rifle." Arthur didn't look at him. "Sir, please get back in the car." Camila went forward. "Sergeant, you seem confused. You serve the crown, and right now I am the crown." Arthur tilted his head a little toward her. "I serve the sovereign, not individual preference. And protocol, ma'am, is not elective." Camila's lips parted in amazement, as if someone had struck her without touching her. "You rude." But before the word was finished, Arthur made a small hand gesture with his palm down. Once, 2 fingers flicked. Corporal Jennings came out of the side colonnade and started coming toward them across the yard. He was calm, steady, and not in a hurry, but he had a goal. Camila saw. She looked at Arthur's hand, then back to his face. "You're getting worse." Arthur said nothing. Thomas laughed nervously. "Do you think you're a soldier in a coup?" The wind picked up, making the hem of Camila's garments spin and blowing some rose petals out of the florist's open crate. The smell of flowers mixed with stress. Camila remarked in a low, angry voice, "You touch that car and you're done. No pension, no ceremony. You'll be folded into silence so quickly you'll forget you ever stood here." Arthur's hand fell to his side. He didn't grab his gun. He didn't have to, since at that moment, right behind Camila, the Jaguar's boot made a quiet metallic chirp. The lock had just reset itself. Arthur's gaze followed the sound, and then shifted to Thomas's hand, which was still half buried in his coat pocket. He could feel a thumb pressing against a button, the way he changed his posture when he knew he had been noticed. Arthur said, "Remote locking system," in a bland voice. "Not factory standard, but aftermarket installation." Camila opened her mouth to say something, but Arthur stopped her. "That means you knew there would be resistance, planned for it, and put countermeasures in a car you said was just for family use." Thomas carefully drew his hand out. "You're reaching?" Arthur moved closer. "Because standard Jaguar estates don't have biometric trunk releases, climate-controlled cargo bays, or remote override systems that work with personal devices." He looked right at Thomas. "Now you made this car to move something valuable that you couldn't risk being found, and you just locked it again right in front of me because you're scared of what's inside." The courtyard was entirely quiet, and Arthur could see everything he needed to see. The sound of the trunk's chirp bounced off the stone, like a voice that had been waiting too long to be heard. Arthur's eyes moved to the back of the car. The boot had just locked itself again, this time from a distance. He saw the movement. Thomas, who was behind Camilla, had put a clicker into his coat pocket, but it wasn't fast enough. Arthur didn't say anything. He took one stride, then 2, smoothly, on purpose, faster than protocol but slower than panic. He took off his ceremonial rifle and adjusted the angle like he had done 1,000 times on parade grounds. Then, with one swift, jarring action, he slammed the steel butt plate solidly against the lock. The sound was like a surgical cut, a clear ringing snap that ripped through the courtyard like thunder. The aftermarket plate broke when it hit something, the paint flaked, and the metal dented inward. There were gasps from the valleys. The aides stopped moving. "What's he doing?" Someone near the archway murmured. The boot jumped. The internal latch, which was no longer in line, let go with a reluctant mechanical sigh. The trunk opened 1 inch, then another, and eventually all the way inside. It was lined with black velvet, but Arthur didn't look down because the blast came from behind him. "God's sake, what do you think you're doing?" Camilla's voice cut through the air like glass breaking in a church. She ran forward with her eyes wide and her mouth twisted into a primal shape. She wasn't acting anymore. She was angry. "You've lost your mind," she said in a hiss. "Do you know what that car means? It's my car that you just wrecked, private royal property." Arthur didn't flinch. Section 4 allows forced access to unresponsive sealed storage during clearance denial. Thomas charged ahead. Arthur turned to face them completely and remarked, "You're quoting emergency laws for a family car. You messed with a diplomatic override tag. That's not family business, that's a breach of security." Camilla immediately reached out and grabbed the front of Arthur's scarlet tunic. "You ceremonial mannequin," she said with a snarl. "You paid too much for a statue. Do you think this will get you a medal? You embarrassed the Queen Consort in her own courtyard." Arthur didn't move. He didn't even look at her gloved hand holding onto his uniform. "Let me go, Mom," he pleaded. Her hand stayed still, but Jennings was already there. "Mom," he whispered softly but firmly, "I need you to step back." 2 more guards came, silent and calm, and formed a discreet perimeter. None of them spoke loudly. They didn't have to, though, for the trunk was wide open and the courtyard was quiet again, thick and vigilant. Camilla stood there, shaking, and held on to Arthur's lapel until Jennings pushed her back by the forearm. Thomas looked at the open contents, and the color drained from his face. Arthur finally turned around and peeked inside. He then let out a breath and whispered in a low voice, "Secure the area. No one comes near this vehicle." The missing diamonds of the late Queen Elizabeth II were hidden inside, shining softly in the velvet black. The inside of the Jaguar's trunk was nothing like a regular storage space. It has a matte black steel lining with stronger brackets and internal latches. In the middle was a sealed diplomatic case that was short, rectangular, and clearly military grade. It wasn't cargo or luggage, something that was supposed to hold things that couldn't be replaced. Arthur moved in closer and opened the front flap. The velvet lining within shone with a soft, almost holy light. The case's inside panel threw a soft golden light over the contents. Padded slots in rows, each one carved to fit a diamond perfectly. Some are as big as acorns, while others are organized in delicate groups that seem like the broken pieces of a crown. 2 oval-cut stones with the same clarity and fire are in the middle. Arthur looked. He didn't need a jeweler. All the men in that courtyard knew what they were looking at. "The Cullinan," Jennings said softly behind him. 3 and 4. Arthur nodded once. "Coronation pairing documented. Historical. Priceless. Missing from the royal collection since Queen Elizabeth II's passing. Rumors had floated silently. Internal audits put off, inventories put off, and items being looked at for maintenance. But no one had told the truth until today." He reached down and picked up a thin portfolio that was hidden between the velvet compartments. Inside are design ideas and precise drawings of a necklace with 12 diamonds, gold chain work, a central pendant with the Cullinan pairing, handwritten notes down the edge, and a letter saying Vienna Gala, final fitting by Thursday. Jennings stepped forward and read over his shoulder. This wasn't preservation, this was conversion. Arthur nodded. From behind them, Camilla said again, but this time her voice broke. "You don't know what you're looking at. These are heirlooms. I'm just consolidating legacy," Arthur said as he turned, "by melting the Queen's coronation diamonds into a vanity necklace. They're not yours to protect," she said angrily. Arthur remarked quietly, "They were part of her private effects, Charles." And I agreed, "Charles isn't here, and the Queen isn't either," she said angrily, "and she didn't leave any instructions that had to be followed." Thomas went forward now, speaking softly and trying to change the story. "This was a transfer. We planned to restore and display the set at Sandringham after the gala." "You're not following the rules," Arthur said, holding up the design sketches. "Drawings for a necklace with your mother's royal cipher and Camilla's initials. Stones that have melted. This isn't restoration." He moved back to the trunk and carefully lifted a little pouch. There were 5 loose stones within, still with archival tags on them. Queen Mary's lesser-known heirlooms. Each label says, Royal Collection, Restricted Transfer, Vault 3A, Balmoral. Jennings let out a breath. "That's a Class A theft." "No," Arthur responded softly. "That's a desecration." Camilla tried to get the case again, but this time Arthur got in her way. Jennings moved faster and discreetly called for perimeter lockdown and transit prep over the radio. and in the quiet that followed, just Arthur's voice stayed strong. "Mom, this isn't yours." The courtyard was silent again, but not because it was peaceful. It was because something dangerous had finally stopped moving. Then from the north gate, they could hear the quiet hum of a car coming. There were no sirens or escorts, just one Navy Land Rover Defender rolling across the gravel with the weight of someone who didn't need to be seen. The gates wouldn't open for her. They were already open. Before the car came to a complete halt, Princess Anne got out. She didn't wear a crown, a sash, or any other ceremonial bullshit. She just had on a dark olive riding jacket, high boots that were dirty from the country, and a face that seemed like it was made of stone. She walked across the courtyard with the calm, steady grace of a woman who had spent her whole life strolling into storms without an umbrella. Arthur stood up straight. Camilla glanced around, her mouth already wide. Anne didn't stop walking when she said, "What are you doing here?" "I was called." Camilla's gaze furrowed. "By whom?" "Wellington Barracks," Anne said without emotion. "And before you call them out for going too far, I suggest you stop talking until you see what I saw." She walked right up to Arthur. Didn't wait or ask for permission. "Show me." Arthur moved to the side and opened the case. Anne looked in only once, but that was long enough. She didn't gasp, flinch, or blink, but her silence grew stronger. "These stones," she remarked bluntly, "are catalogued under the Royal Collection Archive. They were last seen in Balmoral, Vault 3A. Camilla scoffed. "Don't act like you've never moved heirlooms before. They're for show, and their origin is ceremonial." Anne slowly looked up. "So are you," Thomas said, shifting his weight nervously to attempt to get a word in. "It's not what it looks like. This wasn't a theft, it was a family allocation." Anne closed the case and snapped the clasp. "Thomas," she began, turning to him with the warmth of an open tomb, "you are not a trustee of the Royal Collection. You are not a monarch, and you certainly don't decide when we melt down the crown." Camilla's voice was now low and deadly. "I took care of them. Charles said it was okay." Anne raised her hand, and there was stillness. She looked back at Arthur. "Has the asset been inventoried?" "Not yet, Mom. Identification confirmed. Sketches secured. Case remains sealed." Anne nodded. "Then you need to get ready for immediate transport to the tower for classified impoundment. The chain of custody goes through me." Camilla quickly stepped forward. "You don't have the right to take private property." Anne raised an eyebrow. "Private property? You took Class A royal artifacts out of a heritage vault, drove them in an unregistered vehicle, broke protocol, and redesigned them with your initials." She stopped. "Do you think this is a jewelry box, Camilla, or a crown?" Camilla's lips parted, but she couldn't say anything since she had lost control of what she was about to say. Her eyes quickly moved to the guards on either side of the courtyard. Jennings stood next to the diplomatic case, which was now steady. 2 additional Coldstream Guards had silently locked the southern gate. There was silent steel all around the Queen Consort, and there was something she had never been ready for: opposition. Her voice was high and piercing. Arthur said nothing. "You all have lost your minds. This is a ceremonial misunderstanding, not a crime." He didn't have to. Thomas stepped forward instead, his cheeks red. Arthur finally looked at him and said, "You're making a show of this. Do you think uniforms make you prosecutors?" "No, sir. Protocol does." "You'll be caught before dinner," Thomas said angrily. Arthur's face didn't change. "Sir, you're not in charge. You're barely in the clearance log." Princess Anne took a hesitant step toward Camilla, keeping her eyes on her. "Let me make something clear," she murmured in a quiet voice that was full of authority. "This isn't about style or favoritism. It's about stealing and shame." Camilla stood up straight. "Disgrace," she hissed. Anne's brows sharpened. "Everything I've done, every sacrifice, every smile through gritted teeth, every handshake with people I hate, has been for this family. And yet here you are cutting it up for jewelry." Camilla's anger boiled over. "Do you think this throne was ever nice to me? Do you think I married into fairy tales and love? I did what I had to do because she wouldn't leave." "She died," Arthur replied softly. "That's how she left." The words stopped the air. Camilla turned her head quickly to look at him. "You won't talk to me like that." Arthur's voice stayed steady. "And you won't change the legacy of a woman whose shadow you've never been able to escape." Camilla looked like she was about to hit him. Instead, she attacked Anne. "Don't act like you're better than me. You've done worse things." Anne didn't flinch. "Yes, but I've never been caught putting the crown in a car boot," Thomas said angrily. "You're all obsessed with ceremony and shadows. None of this matters. The people want sparkle, not history." Arthur took one step forward. "Then maybe you should have joined the circus." "Enough," Camilla yelled. "This isn't your monarchy," Anne said to Jennings. Get the case to the defender, and call the tower ahead of time. It will leave under royal custody. Jennings nodded. On my way, Mom. Camilla was shivering now. You'll regret this. Do you really think Charles will just sit there? Anne's voice plummeted to a deadly calm. Thomas tried one more time to get back at him by saying, if he has any sense left, he'll thank me for stopping this embarrassment before it got to the press. You're on the side of a foot soldier. Anne gazed at Arthur. No, I'm on the side of the only person here who still knows what loyalty means. The case was dropped. The guards stepped back. Camilla watched it leave, feeling like something had been ripped out of her back. She lunged. Wait, but it was already locked inside, and she had nothing else to cling on to. With two dull, final thuds, the defenders' back doors slammed shut. The sealed diplomatic case inside didn't shine anymore. It pulsed with something heavier. Judgment. Arthur Bainbridge saw two guards stand next to the car. Jennings proceeded to the front passenger side with a clipboard in hand, and wrote out the chain of custody in very neat handwriting. Staff members were discreetly leaving the courtyard. There were no commands, but there didn't need to be any. It wasn't a scene anymore. It was a message. Camila stood on the edge of the stone steps, one hand on the iron railing. Her chest rose and fell like a lady who had been hit but wouldn't fall. Thomas was a little bit of himself, with his hands in his pockets, his lips twitching, and his teeth grinding behind a smile that didn't convince anyone. Anne walked back toward Arthur without stopping. She added calmly, "You did your duty. Not for the crowd, but for him. Now finish it up." Arthur nodded. He turned to the closest aide and gave them 3 simple orders. Lock down the car. Impound the vehicle. Notify Royal Collections for a full audit under Anne's name. No press releases. Camila was able to speak again. "You've made this family look bad in public." Arthur turned. "No, Mom. You did." She stepped forward. "Do you think you've made yourself a hero?" "No," Arthur said, as he adjusted the strap on his weapon. "Just a servant who remembers what he's serving," Thomas said with a laugh. Arthur looked him in the eye and said, "All this for a few polished rocks? They were never just stones. They were history. And you tried to turn them into jewelry." Camila said the next words with anger. Arthur kept her gaze and said, "The monarchy doesn't need guards who think they're priests. Maybe it shouldn't make thieves queens," someone behind them gasped. Anne even blinked once. Camila seemed like she was going to lunge again, but Anne got in the way. "That's enough." Camila turned to her. Anne's voice was hard and clear as she said, "You're defending this mannequin in boots over your own family. He just defended something much more important than family. And what is that?" Anne didn't wait. The crown. The courtyard became quiet. The defender moved slowly forward, making the pebbles crunch under its tires. The case was no longer theirs, and with it the illusion of control that Camila had held onto for years was gone. "Those diamonds were mine," Camila said as it rolled by. Arthur didn't look at her. He just said they were hers. Camila's lips shook, but she didn't say anything. Thomas turned his head away and tightened his jaw. Anne looked at Arthur one last time. "Go back to your post, Sergeant." Arthur saluted. "Yes, Mom." Anne turned to Camila. Her tone was firm, calm, and not an opinion but a command. "The Queen's diamonds are not your costume jewelry." Then she turned her back, leaving Camila alone. She didn't lose her title, but she lost her place, which was far worse. Should a royal guard be able to break into a royal's car if he thinks it was stolen? Was Princess Anne's response correct, or did she go too far? No. And what should happen to Camila and Thomas now that they have been caught? Please leave a comment below to let us know what you think. Make sure to click the bell symbol to get notifications so you never miss what truly transpires behind the crown's most secret walls. If you know someone who still recalls the late Queen's diamonds, send them this video. Every day we upload something. So go ahead and click on the next story on your screen.